Out of the mouths of babes. Isn't that what they say? And in our case, of teens and adults as well. I found those reflections really moving. Well done, everyone, and the parents who filmed them. And one thing that struck me is how, for the most part, all of those reflections had a muted quality to them, a muted energy. And this is really understandable because this is a muted time for all of us. As Glenn observed on Good Friday, that was the first time in 30 years that I hadn't been in church on that day. And being here, if I'm honest, feels really different. Like each of you, I'm sure I want my Easter to be how it usually feels, seeing everyone in person, asking the kids what the Easter bunny brought, hearing a joy in the air that's only partially fueled by chocolate. That's not how it can be right now. By necessity, this Easter is more reflective than we're used to. And it's no wonder, because how can you celebrate with joy during a global crisis? There's a lesson in here for me. I'm often tempted to go quickly from cross to empty tomb. But the lockdown won't let me do that. Instead, I need to sit with the feelings of loss that would have been the experience of Mary Magdalene and all the other disciples. And this is not easy. We hear it in how Peter and the disciple that Jesus loved went to the tomb and then left right away. Not many of us want to linger at the tomb. We see that in how some are reacting to the pandemic, needing fines to stop them from gathering in groups, blaming various organizations, holding wealth for their own self-protection, all ways to rush from the tomb, to block the crisis from deeply touching one's heart. And yet, what do we hear in the second half of the story? I was struck by Mary's raw grief. As I stand with her at the tomb, I feel with her. I feel confused, even angry. My need to cry over my friend's body blocked by circumstance. No wonder she can't recognize Jesus. And yet, there he is, in her confusion, her fear. There he is in her grief. This is where she experiences resurrection, as she lingers at the tomb. There she hears her name. She recognizes the familiar timbre of his compassion, and transformed in a moment of loving connection, she goes to tell the others about what she has experienced. The profound but unsettling message of Easter is how resurrection comes, transformation comes, as we sit with grief, as we face the tomb. There we aren't very far from the cross. Dietrich Bonhoeffer tells us that resurrection can only happen through the cross. We may want Jesus to be gloriously transported from earth to heaven, but instead, he is joined to our pain, and we are joined to his. And in that, we are joined to one another's. And that, my friends, is the real grace, because it draws us out of ourselves into union, into solidarity, into genuine love that gives everything over for others. Not Jesus dying in our place. No. Jesus showing us what love looks like. Death accepted, even for strangers. That's what Dominic told us. This love is being revealed by so many right now, by medical professionals, by frontline workers, by grocery clerks, by all of us in so many ways. And this, in the end, is what Easter is about. We let go of ourselves and rise into new life in Christ. Each living out Christ's loving presence in their lives. Now, as I shared earlier, we've been reflecting all Lent on the gift of water. Water is a symbol of grace, gift of divine life in all of us, giving strength, transforming fear into courage, enabling us to step forward in love and service of others, despite the cost. And we affirm this in our baptism, and we reaffirm it every time we gather for communion, even virtually. We're joined to Christ, united in God and with each other, a union that deepens in this time that we are experiencing at the tomb. We may feel like we can't go on, but then we experience a capacity from beyond ourselves to keep going, to keep living, to keep loving. I think Connor summed it up when he said, Easter is about support and friendship. And when his dad asked why, he said, well, because it always is. It always is about support and friendship. We're seeing that kind of Easter lived out as people stay connected, as people look out for each other, as they pick up groceries for neighbors, as they make face masks, or in the UK, as my young cousins are doing, sewing scrubs for doctors and nurses. People who are pooling resources, sharing those who have, sharing with those who don't. It's what we read in Acts, how they shared everything that they owned in common so that everyone would have enough. We are reminded in all of this that death and fear are never the end. Love and life always have the last word. Now, this isn't immediate, which is hard for us. Even if we want it to be immediate, it's not. Too often we literalize the 3 days that Jesus spent in the tomb, from cross to empty tomb. But in those 3 days, imagine the disciples would barely sink into their grief before they come out of it on the other side. Instead, we need to remember that 3 means wholeness. 3 means completeness. It speaks less about a length of time and more about the nature of the experience. They encountered Jesus as risen, having passed through death, in union with God, and inviting them to the same depth of union in their own lives here and now. I wonder if that happened really slowly over time. Luke tells us that Easter effectively was 40 days long. I wonder if that's perhaps because the Christ needed to be with them for as long as it took for their hearts to be transformed. That comforts me, because what we're going through is a long duration, and it's really difficult. But over time, I really believe something transformative is happening. As Paul has shared, Easter is about hope, not about my need for joy. I received a poem recently that evokes this quality of hope in this time. It was written during the great cholera epidemic at the end of the 19th century. It names how people stayed home, and in that they learned new ways of being and learned new ways of thinking. These are the last lines. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. For me, that's resurrection. That's Easter. And that's my prayer for us all. May it be so.